Okay, and welcome back. It's hour 3. We're going to talk to Professor Jim Fetzer this hour. Jim is a regular now on the program. Happy to always have him on board. He's just loaded with fascinating information, insight, and does real research into real problems. Hello, Jim. Welcome back.
Oh, Jeff, I'm just delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very nice of you to say. It's always fascinating to talk to you. What are you working on now?
Well, I have a brand new book with 13 contributors, Jeff, and it's just sensational. It is focused on challenging some of the most cherished and deeply held beliefs, especially of the American people. We have no axe to grind. Unlike the parties to these frauds, we're only committed to exposing the truth. To give you a sense of the flavor of the book, William Casey, director of the CIA, was reported to have told his staff, "Our disinformation campaign will be a success when everything the American people believe is false." And they seem to have done a pretty good job of it, where this book explains how we know that we did not go to the moon but faked it, that Paul McCartney died and was replaced, that we hung a double, not Saddam, that Osama died in Afghanistan, not Pakistan, that the Holocaust was different than historians claim.
Oh, is it ever? Yes.
Jeff, I got to tell you, some may say this may be the most dangerous book in the world, and they just might be right, because once you see through all of these illusions, you'll never view the world the same way again.
We have been so surrounded and drowned with illusions. Very few people, I think, anymore have an honest grasp of what we call or used to call reality. They just don't. How can they? They're being pounded around the clock by the fraud media. It's not a media at all. It's just a propaganda mill. And they don't have a chance to learn to ask the right questions and so forth. Look in the guests section, and you'll see Jim Fetzer's name. You can click on that and go right to his site. His most current column, Adam Lanza, the fictional perpetrator of the Sandy Hook hoax, is up there at the top. And videos. All right, I'm looking for the book. Where's the book? Do we have the book there?
I hope you do, Jeff. It's entitled, and I suppose we didn't go to the moon either. And I feature
That's a great title. It's on the front page at my site in the book carousel. You'll see it in there. It's a black cover with some white print. You'll see it.
Absolutely right, and it's laden with photographs because I'd like to use the cover to make arguments. You'll see a photograph side by side of Paul McCartney, the original Paul James, and then his replacement. You'll see a photograph of the real Saddam and then his double. You'll see Osama bin Laden and one of many impersonators. Among my favorites, Jeff, however, is the top of the back cover, where we have a photograph of the British football team at Auschwitz, where beside it is the caption, "What? You didn't know there was a UK soccer team at Auschwitz?"
But that's quite a picture, too. Amazing. There's so much history that's unknown, hidden, lost, strayed, stolen, purposely destroyed, revised constantly. And I'm amazed that we do as well as we do, trying to find out the truth. But thanks to you and books like this book will be the kind of a book that is a life changer if people will just sit down and read it.
Well, I appreciate your saying that, Jeff, because I feel that way, too. In fact, I'm just so pleased, the way it came together. It's just sensational.
Excellent. And it's available. I'm going to have James put it up next to your name. It should have been up there earlier. It's available Amazon right now?
Yes, it's already at Amazon.com.
Okay.
It's under
Great.
Ole Damagard's books. Ole actually produced the cover and set the type. He's a wonderful guy. Mike Palachuk had the inspiration for the book. The subtitle, by the way, is The Beatles, the Holocaust, and Other Mass Illusions, where we have the contributors include Jade Widner, Nicholas Kollerstrom, Ph.D., Yvonne Wachter, Robert Forison, Ph.D., Thomas Dalton, Ph.D., Anonymous Scholar, Mike Palachuk, Jim Mars, Winston Wu, James A. Larson, James H. Fetzer, Ph.D., Zen Gardner, Sterling Harwood, JD, PhD. These people have done excellent work, Jeff. I think, that anyone who actually delves into this is going to find it a life-changing experience. I like your phrase.
Tell me a little bit more about the McCartney thing. Whoever they replaced him with, vocally speaking, had to match up with him pretty well.
Pretty well, yeah. But in fact, the replacement was right-handed, whereas Paul was left.
Ah.
And while he matches up fairly well, voice studies have shown they're different. And in fact, the key here was establishing that we really were talking about two people. So that I was most impressed when I discovered the forensic study undertaken by two Italian scientists. Jeff, get this. They set out to disprove the hypothesis. They thought they could establish that Paul before the date of September 9th, 1966, and Paul after were the same person, but they proved precisely the opposite.
Fascinating. Now, did these, let's call him Paul number 2. Does he know about this, or was he put through some kind of an MK Ultra thing to Tavistock him?
No. Yeah, he's usually referred to as Faul, F-A-U-L, for False Paul.
Sure, yeah.
Or sometimes as Sir Paul, because it was he who was knighted by the Queen. But just to review some of the forensics to drive home the point, they took photographs where they're singing. You invariably open your mouth, right? So there are plenty of photographs where you can compare their teeth. And Paul had very bad teeth and a narrow palate, whereas Faul has a normal palate and rather good teeth. They have different ears. If you compare their skulls and their faces, Paul's was more youthful and roundish. Faul's was more oblong and had a more mature look. Their height is different. I put on the back cover a picture of Paul with his then fiancée, Jane Asher. And another photograph with Faul with the same woman, and he's a half a head taller.
Wow. All right, well, I'm sure that with the 8 billion pictures of them out there, there must be more work ahead to compare and contrast.
It's fascinating, but I guarantee in regard to each of the issues we address, there's more than enough evidence to prove the case. In other words, I've been very systematic and methodical about all of this and marshaling the evidence and getting the right authors and the right contributions, which may be a benefit of having taught logic, critical thinking, and scientific reasoning for 35 years before my retirement in 2006.
Okay, and you're going to tell us that we didn't go to the moon either. That's an interesting one. That has had a hell of a lot of energy put into it as a subject. There have been some very bright people studying it. It's rather simple. We could not afford to fail. That's why, apparently, Stanley Kubrick was hired to film it so we'd have something to broadcast. We couldn't take a chance. Cold War, all the rest of it. Very, very big stakes.
Very good, Jeff. In fact, yes, absolutely right. It was a political issue. The Russians, the Soviet Union, actually had launched Sputnik, which was very embarrassing, suggesting they were scientifically and technically ahead of the United States. So JFK declared the program to put a man on the moon. But, of course, he was not able to see the insuperable obstacles that would have made that impossible. It's rather like had he been informed that the Soviets had learned the date of the invasion of the Bay of Pigs and Fidel already knew when we were going to land, he would have called it off. I think once he understood the insuperable obstacles provided, for example, by the Van Allen radiation belt,
right,
he would have known that this was simply a scientifically impossible task. And Jay, would you believe, Jeff, would you believe that NASA recently announced, and let me get the date, it's 30 August 2012, Jeff, NASA announced that the principal obstacle to a manned mission to Mars was overcoming the Van Allen radiation.
I ran the story, I know, kind of putting both feet in mouth in a way.
What do they think? The Van Allen radiation belt
they just appeared,
up?
Yeah. They just showed up. Kind of silly stuff. So tell me about some of the other things in the book that are your favorites. These are all fun, and I use the term correctly, they're fun intellectually to explore because we don't get the other side. And here you are presenting the other side of many of the biggest stories of our time.
Well, no doubt the most impressive chapter about the moon landings is by Winston Wu, The Apollo Moon Hoax, 35 Proofs We Did Not Go.
Oh, I wish I could. I got to read that. That sounds great.
You're going to love it. I mean,
yeah.
Jeff, we have 100 pages on the moon landing, and we have 100 pages on Paul McCartney. And the reason the Paul case is so important is because if you could replace the most observed, the most closely scrutinized person in the world and get away with it, you could replace anyone.
Anybody.
Well,
that's the big lesson right there, of course.
And I'll tell you something. This is you asked for my favorite, the chapter by James A. Larson, entitled "Replacing Paul: The Who, the How, and the Why," where his father was the leader of the band known as the Four Preps, so he grew up in the world of music, is utterly fascinating, Jeff. And I'll tell you, I think he has put his finger on the person who actually replaced Paul. So I'm thrilled with that chapter. Larson invested a huge time and effort and goes through 6 different candidates, but I think he finally put his finger on it. And I remember he went to bed. We'd had a conversation going through his chapter, not knowing, and he woke up knowing. And when we talked that day, I was really fascinated and enthralled. And now he has proof after proof. I mean, one photograph after another, photographs of the parents, photographs of the children. This is an absolutely stunning development to actually be able to figure out who replaced Paul.
I've got to sit down with this book. It's here. I've got it. It's just getting a little bit of time to go through it. It sounds like what you've done is taken some of these remarkable events and, taken them to a much higher level of research. They've been knocked around for years. But the Van Allen belt, and when NASA made that, and I put 2 and 2 together when I ran the story and laughed. I may have laughed out loud. What are they saying?
Well, Jeff, you're not a gullible sap. Unfortunately, most Americans are scientifically illiterate and don't understand that those spacesuits were actually costumes. They could not have possibly provided the kind of protection necessary to transit the Van Allen radiation belt. And we have, all the photographic anomalies are simply stunning. You have, for example, a photo of the moon lander, which shows no sign of a blasted-out rocket motor exhaust crater beneath it.
No crater whatsoever.
Not even any dust on the pod.
No, it was put there by a crane, obviously. It was lifted in.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, we actually have a moon rover, which has no tracks in front or behind, that was, just as you suggest, lowered by a crane. The first interest I had in this was...
Yeah, that's a terrific picture. You've got that picture?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes, we got it all. We got a ton of them. I mean, this book is absolutely loaded, just jam-packed with photographs, diagrams, studies. We even have a map of Auschwitz, Jeff, and would you believe that at Auschwitz there were many facilities that are inconsistent with the idea that it was an extermination camp.
Oh, my God. I've seen the pictures. I know. I've studied this for 25 years since I was in college. I know what you mean. I know.
There was a hospital with OBGYN facilities.
They had an opera house.
They had an opera house.
A symphony orchestra. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They had a woodworking shop.
Hey, listen, we're not trying to make this sound like a picnic over there, okay? That's not the point. The point is we're not getting the whole story. And now you can get the whole story and make up your own minds.
Jeff, they even had a brothel.
I know.
Yeah. I tell you. And the fact of the matter is these were not extermination centers. In fact, one of the great virtues of our study of the Holocaust, we have 50 pages of the Holocaust, 4 authors, each of whom is simply superb in what they contribute here, establishing that on the basis of the laws of biochemistry and the laws of material science, it's possible to disprove the official themes or theses that define the Holocaust, to wit, 6 million Jews having been gassed to death in chambers using Zyklon B. And the argument turns out to be as follows. Zyklon B is a form of cyanide that would have rendered the bodies pink. But we don't have any reports of pink bodies from any of these.
Well, nor do we have blue walls.
That's right. Very, very good, Jeff. You're right on top of it, because it also would turn the walls of any chambers in which it was used blue, but the only blue walls are those that were used for delousing to kill body lice.
Yeah, every
which they
camp
had to do to contain typhus, dysentery, other problems that were plaguing the camps. So
correct.
It was being used for sanitary, for hygienic purposes.
That's correct.
And they simply converted it to being a mechanism of death and destruction. Would you believe the 6 million figure it has theological or religious origins, not empirical or historic? Get this, Jeff. There are over 236 references in the international press to 6 million Jews in dire straits or in fear of loss of their lives before the Nuremberg Tribunal, beginning in 1890.
Wow. Well, the first time the 6 million figure that I remember reading it, coming across it in historical terms, was right after World War One. So it's been around. The problem with 6 million...
We put a dozen different examples of these publications.
See, you've done it right. This is a remarkable book, even more remarkable than I thought. And I did get a chance to thumb through it, but I couldn't read it, and I wanted to. So here we are. Let's give the name again, the formal title.
And I suppose we didn't go to the moon either.
Yeah.
And it's available at createspace.com and also at amazon.com.
You know, Kubrick's wife is still alive, and I wish she before she goes, she would give an honest, frank interview about this, just for the fun of it. I mean, come on, it's a long time ago. Who cares, right? We pulled it off. It was a political move, and it worked. So
there's a wonderful chapter by Jay Widener about how Kubrick filmed it using what's known as front screen projection.
Correct. Jay knows. Yeah, I've known Jay for a long time.
He's a good guy. I've had him on my own show, too, and I really like him.
Oh, he's wonderful. Yeah. I've known Jay for too long. He's very smart, very good researcher, and brilliant at analysis. He really grasps things quickly. Okay, and suppose... All right, give me the title.
And I suppose go to the movie.
And I suppose that's
now,
cute.
Originally, it was going to follow a book entitled "No One Died at Sandy Hook."
Yeah. And this is a much better title.
Well, which I've proven a dozen different ways, but in fact, we had a delay in the production of that book, which has led to my re-editing it now. It's my next project after this. So this title was supposed to follow up on No One Died at Sandy Hook, and I suppose we didn't go to the moon either.
Yeah, that's cute. Well, it doesn't matter because it stands on its own just fine being first.
I agree, Jeff. I think it's actually better because this is taking some major issues and dismembering them, taking them apart right down to the raw data. In fact, in relation to the Holocaust, it turns out that the best empirical data we have comes from the International Committee of the Red Cross that was visiting all of the camps.
They went to all the camps. They had active staff, I think, at Auschwitz for the entire length of the war, that manufacturing, I guess you'd call it a manufacturing center.
Would you believe, among other points, that more Catholics died at Auschwitz than Jews?
No, I wouldn't be surprised. No, nothing would really surprise me about World War II. We don't know what happened. Very few people do.
The International Committee updated its study in 1993, Jeff, and they concluded that approximately 297,086 persons died in all those camps, far removed from the figure we've heard.
Well, it would take, just for your own information, you probably haven't heard this, but the Germans kept meticulous records whenever they built anything. Architectural records, designs, the works. And every camp had a certain number of crematories. First of all, they could not bury everyone. They didn't have the time. People did die of typhus and other diseases, and we have crematories now. People are cremated. It happens. I had a young man on the program. Well, he was young during the war, but he still sounded rather young. And I told the story before, so if you've heard it, bear with me, folks. He was 12, and he came down with typhus. He was put in a hospital, and I've forgotten which city in Germany, which had an enormous ward for people with typhus. And there might have been 100 people in this huge room, and they were all struggling, and they were sick. And then, some died, some didn't. One day, he said, and he was on the program here, the doors opened, 2 men came in with an enormous, large steel tank. and they wheeled this tank into the middle of the room, turned the valve on at the top, and left the room. A gas in the tank filled the room, and he said he read the letters on the tank, and it said Zyklon B. They were using it to treat hospital patients who had developed typhus, to try to knock out the lice in the beds, in their hair, and everywhere else in the room. So he was, and after a half an hour, he said they came in, opened the windows, and left.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it's a true story. The guy told it right here. He lived through it. Nobody died from Zyklon B. It's like being sprayed with DDT or something like that. It's similar.
And
It's an insecticide is what it was.
Yes, and if you had enough to die, your body would turn pink, but we have no reports of pink bodies. So the pink and blue argument is just devastating.
Well,
and the fact is, it appears to have, the 6 million figure appears to have a theological origin in a disputed passage in Leviticus that suggests that the chosen people will not be able to return to the promised land until they're minus 6 million consumed in the flames, where even the number requires an interpolation because there was no character for 6 million in the original language.
Interesting. All right, very good. Back in just a minute with Jim. Hang on, don't go away. Okay, I'm back with Jim Fetzer. And I suppose we didn't go to the moon either, is the title of the book, and it is loaded with information that you'll really find congregated, aggregated, and brought together like Jim has done nowhere else. The Beatles, the Holocaust, and other mass illusions. Now that takes a lot of courage, my friend, to step forward at any time, no matter how much solid data you have, and contest the some people say holocaust, but Holocaust. And you've done it. Now, are you not concerned about your academic contemporaries and peers getting on your case? They're all usually afraid of their own shadows. Here you are taking on one of the biggest, twisted, corrupt illusions of all time.
You're absolutely right, Jeff. And I'll tell you what put me over on it was the scientific arguments. My PhD is in the history and the philosophy of science. I know that the laws of science are inviolable. They can't be changed. They don't require any enforcement. They can't be violated. So when we had arguments about the pink bodies and the blue walls, those were scientifically impeccable arguments, and they provided the foundation here. I participated in a conference a year and a half or so ago on the campus of the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, on academic freedom. Are there limits to inquiry? JFK, 9/11, and the Holocaust. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I turned left and right to find some academician or representative of the Professional Association for Academicians, the AAUP, the American Association of University Professors, to step up to the bat on this, and they would not do it, Jeff. Not even the representatives of the AAUP, which stands for, the First Amendment and academic freedom, were willing to step up on this issue.
No, they're all afraid.
And would you believe, as a consequence, after I participated in that meeting and talked about the Holocaust, Wikipedia gutted my entry. It had been very substantial, lots about my research on JFK, 9/11.
Wikipedia didn't gut it, Jim. We know who gutted it. They go in there.
The wiki is a Zionist op.
Thank you.
But Jeff, the fact of the matter is I had a copy that was quite recent before they gutted it. So I published an article entitled James H. Fetzer, Wikipedia, the Free Encyclopedia Busted, where I compared what remained now after they had butchered it. And you could see the huge amount. I mean, it was more than double the size of what you'd find from my mere academic description. In fact, they took out 2/3 of it. And I've now published that on Veterans veteranstruithnetwork.com, veteranstruithnetwork.com. Do a search just to see how bad it is with Wikipedia. I mean, they're fine as a resource for relatively, simple, basic, uncontroversial, non-political issues.
They've been, they have shredded me for more years than I care to remember, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It's very frustrating. We used to spend a lot of time.
Well, it is exasperating because I actually had an excellent entry that was very reflective of the massive research I've done on all these subjects. And of course, now all 150 of my articles with Veterans Today have been obliterated because I had a dispute with the senior editor of the journal over Jade Helm. And that's
a shame. That's just a shame.
We can return to that issue tomorrow. I'm so pleased I'll be with you regularly on Fridays, Jeff, on first and last Friday.
First and last Friday of the month. Exactly.
Absolutely sensational. Now, on the moon landing, I know you're familiar with the anomalies in the moon photographs where you have shadows cast in two directions.
Yes.
And some of the others we've been discussing. But here's one I'll bet you haven't run across before. This comes from Jack White. This was a longtime friend of mine involved in JFK research, who became involved and has a huge research repository on the Apollo program. So look for Jack White's Apollo moon photo studies. But here's a point he made. He went through the different 6 different claimed landings on the moon and counted up how many photographs were taken and the amount of time they had to do it. Listen to this, Jeff. The agency wants the world to believe that 5,771 photographs were taken in 4,834 minutes. If nothing but photography had been done, such a feat is clearly impossible. Made even more so by all documented activities of the astronauts. Imagine 1.19 photos every minute that were made on the moon. That's one picture every 50 seconds. The secret NASA tried to hide has been discovered.
That's too funny. That's
amazing.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah.
And Jeff, I'm sure you've already been aware of this, but many others aren't. Each of these pictures that we have of the moon landing are perfectly framed. I mean, they're beautifully focused.
Oh, yeah.
And yet the camera was mounted on the outside of the suit, so they couldn't even focus it. There was no eyepiece, Jeff. They were just turning and clicking.
That's right. They couldn't see, and yet we have perfectly framed photos. So, yeah, there's so much wrong with it. It's laughable. And there have been some good documentaries. In fact, what is the name of one of them? A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. Yeah. That's not a bad one. There's several good ones out there actually showing the guy wires holding these astronauts up when they were trying to jump around, allegedly, in near zero G, or whatever the G is. Up there. Yeah, it's funny.
The great one I saw, those were the first when I was in London, and we were staying at the Morgan Hotel. My wife's maiden name was Morgan, so when I brought her over after a trip I'd made, because I knew she'd love London, I just happened on a hotel, with her same name, the Morgan on Bloomsbury Street, which backs onto the British Museum, Jeff. And we were there in the evening on a BBC channel. They were playing Conspiracy Theory. Did man land on the moon? And it's just fantastic how many scientific arguments were being produced. That got me hooked on the issue way back when.
Very good. Very good. More things about the moon. The dual-angled shadows are you'd think that these would be front page all over the place. They're not. They're embarrassing. They did their best, and I think what they did in the 1960s was quite extraordinary. But they bungled so many times, so many things, and it's all in your book. All the highlights are there.
Yep. Now here's one I learned about when I shared the book with a friend who knew of one image with which I was unfamiliar. And you're seeing the moon lander, and you see the moon rover tracks, but the moon rover hasn't been unloaded from the moon lander yet.
That's too funny. That's too funny. I got to see this. I've been getting up and during the breaks looking for my book. I can't find it. I've got it here somewhere. I want to go looking again right now. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Okay, back with Jim. And you know what? I just realized where my book is. Where do your best books go? What happens to your best books?
You don't lend them to a friend, do you?
That's right.
Well, you know, Jeff, if we actually had gone to the moon, then it would be all the more stunning that NASA claims to have lost all of its original footage of the moon landings.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Not only that, but they are deleting moon photographs from NASA's site. And that's because, of course, modern technology, you can reveal the fraud in the photographs. But this would be the most precious footage in human history that NASA claims.
And they lost it.
And they claim to have lost it.
Right. Sure.
I mean, believe it.
It's not even clever. Come on. They could have burned a building. They should have burned some useless building down and said, well, it went up in flames. Whatever.
It's ridiculous, isn't
we lost it. Come on.
And we haven't talked about Saddam and Osama.
Now, this is interesting about Saddam Hussein. And as a professor, I'm glad you're pronouncing his name correctly. It's not Saddam. It's Saddam Hussein. And your position in the book is that they didn't hang him. They hung someone else, a double.
That's right.
And tell me more, because I had a lot of respect for that man.
Well, I was contacted by the wife, the mother of a B-1 bomber pilot who actually was given the coordinates for a restaurant on the outskirts of Baghdad, and he was instructed that this was the big one. He dropped 2 JDAM bombs on this restaurant, and he took out Saddam, his 2 sons, and 50 to 60 members of the general staff on 7 April 2003, only 3 weeks into the Iraqi invasion.
Wow.
When he got back to base, he was lionized. He was put on CNN. They gave him the Distinguished Flying Cross, Jeff. And when he came back to California for R&R, his family resided in Orange County, and there the Crystal Cathedral of the Reverend Robert Schiller held a service just to commemorate Chris Wachter, who is the name of the pilot. His mother is Yvonne Wachter, and they televised the services at the Crystal Cathedral. And when the Pentagon discovered that he was being feted for taking out Saddam, they had him fly back to Langley, and they told him that while they admired his flying skills, that officially Saddam got away. And it turns out the reason appears to be the following. The 3 presidents, Reagan, Carter, and Ford, had signed executive orders against the assassination of the leader of foreign nations, which had been violated by Bush, which is why the mission accomplished celebration aboard the USS Liberty was such a fiasco. And they put a double in a spider hole, claimed they found him there. They held him in custody. They wouldn't turn him over to the Iraqis, Jeff, because the Iraqis would have recognized immediately this was not Saddam.
Right.
And the Red Cross eventually arranged for his wife to visit, and she came out screaming.
I remember that.
Yeah.
No, she actually was.
Husband.
She actually was irate. She was yelling. That's correct.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And would you believe it? An Australian journalist by the name of Joe Vials noticed that
Joe Vials.
Thank you, because
great.
I've been wanting to know the correct way to pronounce that. Joe Vials. Excellent.
Terrific writer.
Yeah, he noticed that the teeth, it's like with the McCartney case, he noticed the teeth and the jaw were different. That Saddam had immaculate teeth and an overbite, and the replacement had terrible teeth and an underbite. And when I discovered he'd made that claim, I tracked down a copy of the Ace of Spades from the American Military Command in Iraq, where they had a card for each of the leaders of the Iraqi government, and confirmed that Saddam had this magnificent set of teeth. So in order to obfuscate what had happened, they used the double, they put him on trial, and they hung him. And I think they probably had promised him that they'd have a stool there, so when they dropped him on the rope, he wouldn't actually die.
Sure.
But they,
they got rid of the evidence.
They forgot.
Yeah. No,
you can't have a guy who looks like this guy, even in Tahiti, sipping Mai Tais, Jeff.
You know what's really funny is when you mentioned that about his teeth, I remember that he had immaculate teeth. You're correct.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
And he's a guy who had 7 or 8 palaces. He would never have deigned to climb down into a dirt hole. I mean, that was absurd. face.
Absurd, ridiculous, dumb.
Absolutely.
Also, whoever went through the trial was given a healthy supply of hair coloring because the hair, you remember?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Yeah, they were dyeing his hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's really incredible.
It's all an image game. It's all a game of it's propaganda. It's mind control, and it's really relatively easy to do when you own the media. So, not a big surprise.
And actually, that replacement was a piece of cake compared to Paul McCartney.
I know who has my book. I'm going to get it. I'm mad now. I have to. Now we did have a picture. Where was it? You sent it to me. The two Pauls, and the teeth are embarrassingly different.
Yeah, that's right in the chapter.
It's not even close.
Right. See, I obtained a translation of the article by the two Italian scientists, which was originally in Wired Italia, which is the Italian version of Wired magazine, and it has all these photographic studies. So I obtained a translation and I published it in the book. So each of these sections is complete evidentially to prove the case. Believe me, this would be admissible in a court of law, what has been put together in this book about each of these issues.
Oh, I believe it. I'm sure it's laid out exactly like that. What? And now there are other things. I mean, we could go on. All through history, modern history especially, there have been doubles. That's not unusual.
Yes.
Most power-oriented leaders will have a double.
Yes.
Adolf Hitler, at the end of the war, you look at the picture of him outside the film. It's not the same guy. It's a little shorter man patting the shoulders of these little boys, and anyway, that's a whole nother story we could talk about.
But you're absolutely right. Stalin had doubles. Most of leaders who
Churchill, there were 3 or 4.
That's right.
Yeah.
Churchill had 3 or 4. He was quite a remarkable guy.
He was a disgusting pig. I don't want to make my feelings too obvious, but...
Hey, listen, all this stuff, where Seymour Hersh created a stir by saying that Obama had exaggerated his role in taking out Osama because the Pakistani government had actually identified his location, was only, a fabrication on the part of Seymour Hersh. In fact, I recently gave an interview to FARS, F-A-R-S, on Osama Obama and the book list, which is simply preposterous, because Osama actually died in Afghanistan on or about 15 December 2001. He was buried in an unmarked grave. There were local obituaries.
There were a few little stories about that leaked out over here. Just a few. I remember.
Fox News actually published on 26 December, just less than 2 weeks later, a report that bin Laden was already dead, which you can still find online, 26 December. David Ray Griffin has a book about it. Osama bin Laden, Dead or Alive. Nick Kollerstrom, the English historian of science, who's the leading expert on the 7/7 London bombing attacks, with his book Terror on the Tube, now in its 3rd edition, published an article entitled Osama bin Laden 1957 to 2001, showing examples of several of these, fake forms of fakery. I founded Scholars for 9/11 Truth in December of 2005. And in 2006, we published an article including consulting the best experts on Osama, who confirmed that the videos and audios coming out were not authentic Osama bin Laden. They were fakes. Bruce Lawrence from Duke was the leading expert who participated in that. So I've got all the evidence here about Osama also having died the second time for the political expedience of Barack Obama. He was under criticism for having Guantanamo open, so they claimed that the tip as to Osama's location came from Guantanamo. Oh, aren't we glad it's still open? And they used troops in Pakistan, for which he'd been criticized, so aren't we glad they were there? And it wiped questions about his birth certificate off the front page and posed him for a triumphal re-election for having taken out the most wanted man in the world. For the second time, Osama died to benefit Obama. It's some story.
Yeah, it is. Have you seen the documentary Dreams of My Real Father?
I have run across it recently.
Joel, doggone it, from New York, put it
Yeah,
together.
it's fairly unnerving, Jeff.
You're damn right. It is the truth, as much as I can get to it. And I would suggest that he had inside help to put that thing together. He did a fine job with it, but there's just no question that Frank Marshall Davis was his father. None. Zero.
It's really astonishing when you look at what he's marshaled together.
Oh, yeah. The president has the same fatty area under his lower lip that his dad had, but his father had much larger lips, which sat upon that fatty area right above the chin. And you look at them; they're all the markers are there. It's amazing. Anyway, Jim, listen. I'm going to get my book back, and I'm going to go through this because these are all some of my very favorite subjects. I congratulate you for taking them on, for having the courage to do so. I hope a ton of people buy the book and look at it. It's really the kind of book, and the name again is, and I suppose we didn't go to the moon either. It's the kind of book that will change and help liberate you from the lies and deceit of the machine that runs this planet. So do take a look at it, buy a copy, and have fun, because it's really a lot of fun to do that kind of research. Thank you, Jim. Great to have you on board.
My great pleasure, Jeff. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
You take care. Okay. Back tomorrow night. I'm tired. I'm going to try and go to bed early. The book again is, and I suppose we didn't go to the moon either, and it is obviously a superb book to pick up and spend time with. We'll be right back in 21 hours. Talk to you then.
That Osama died in Afghanistan, not Pakistan, that the Holocaust was different than historians claim.
Oh, is it ever? Yes.
Jeff, I got to tell you, some may say this may be the most dangerous book in the world, and they just might be right, because once you see through all of these illusions, you'll never view the world the same way again.
We have been so surrounded and drowned with illusions. Very few people, I think, anymore have an honest grasp of what we call or used to call reality. They just don't. How can they? They're being pounded around the clock by the fraud media. It's not a media at all. It's just a propaganda mill. And they don't have a chance to learn to ask the right questions and so forth. Look in the guests section, and you'll see Jim Fetzer's name. You can click on that and go right to his site. His most current column, Adam Lanza, the fictional perpetrator of the Sandy Hook hoax, is up there at the top. And videos. All right, I'm looking for the book. Where's the book? Do we have the book there?
I hope you do, Jeff. It's entitled, and I suppose you're saying that, Jeff, because I feel that way too. In fact, I'm just so pleased, the way it came together. It's just sensational.
Excellent. And it's available. I'm going to have James put it up next to your name. It should have been up there earlier. It's available Amazon right now?
Yes, it's already at Amazon.com.
Okay.
It's under
Great.
Ole Damagard's books. Ole actually produced the cover and set the type. He's a wonderful guy. Mike Palachuk had the inspiration for the book. The subtitle, by the way, is The Beatles, the Holocaust, and Other Mass Illusions, where we have the contributors include Jade Widner, Nicholas Kollerstrom, Ph.D., Yvonne Wachter, Robert Forason, Ph.D., Thomas Dalton, Ph.D., anonymous scholar, Mike Palachuk, Jim Mars, Winston Wu, James A. Larson, James H. Fetzer, Ph.D., Zen Gardner, Sterling Harwood, J.D., Ph.D. These people have done excellent work, Jeff. I think, that anyone who actually delves into this is going to find it a life-changing experience. I like your phrase.
Tell me a little bit more about the McCartney thing. Whoever they replaced him with, vocally speaking, had to match up with him pretty well.
Pretty well, yeah. But in fact...
Okay, and welcome back. It's hour 3. I'm going to talk to Professor Jim Fetzer this hour. Jim is a regular now on the program. Happy to always have him on board. He's just loaded with fascinating information, insight, and does real research into real problems. Hello, Jim. Welcome back.
Oh, Jeff, I'm just delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very nice of you to say. It's always fascinating to talk to you. What are you working on now?
Well, I have a brand new book with 13 contributors, Jeff, and it's just sensational. It is focused on challenging some of the most cherished and deeply held beliefs, especially of the American people. We have no axe to grind. Unlike the parties to these frauds, we're only committed to exposing the truth. To give you a sense of the flavor of the book, William Casey, director of the CIA, was reported to have told his staff, "Our disinformation campaign will be a success when everything the American people believe is false." And they seem to have done a pretty good job of it, where this book explains how we know that we did not go to the moon but faked it, that Paul McCartney died and was replaced, that we hung a double, not Saddam. The replacement was right-handed, whereas Paul was left.
And
while he matches up fairly well, voice studies have shown they're different. And in fact, the key here was establishing that we really were talking about two people, so that I was most impressed when I discovered the forensic study undertaken by two Italian scientists. Jeff, get this. They set out to disprove the hypothesis. They thought they could establish that Paul before the date of September 9th, 1966, and Paul after were the same person, but they proved precisely the opposite.
Fascinating. Now, let's call him Paul number 2. Does he know about this, or was he put through some kind of an MK Ultra thing to Tavistock him?
No. Yeah, he's usually referred to as Fall, F-A-U-L, for False Paul.
Sure, yeah.
Or sometimes as Sir Paul, because it was he who was knighted by the Queen. But just to review some of the forensics to drive home the point, they took photographs where they're singing. You invariably open your mouth, right? So there are plenty of photographs where you can compare their teeth. And Paul had very bad teeth and a narrow palate, whereas we didn't go to the moon either. And I feature
That's
on
a
the
great
front.
title. It's on the front page at my site in the book carousel. You'll see it in there. It's a black cover with some white print. You'll see it.
Absolutely right, and it's laden with photographs because I'd like to use the cover to make arguments. You'll see a photograph side by side of Paul McCartney, the original Paul James, and then his replacement. You'll see a photograph of the real Saddam and then his double. You'll see Osama bin Laden and one of many impersonators. Among my favorites, Jeff, however, is the top of the back cover, where we have a photograph of the British football team at Auschwitz, where beside it is the caption, "What? You didn't know there was a UK soccer team at Auschwitz?"
But that's quite a picture, too. Amazing. There's so much history that's unknown, hidden, lost, strayed, stolen, purposely destroyed, revised constantly. And I'm amazed that we do as well as we do, trying to find out the truth. But thanks to you and books like this book will be the kind of a book that is a life changer if people will just sit down and read it.
Well, I appreciate